Hey guys, welcome back to Release the Craftin. Priscilla here with another episode of Storycraft, where I tell you a story and I do a craft. And today I am doing a request by one of my lovely patrons over on Patreon. They asked to hear the story of the Bell Witch. And you guys, this is actually kind of funny because I read it, I was like, yeah, totally, I'm on it, I know what to do. But for whatever reason, dyslexia and ADHD, I'm going to blame probably. What I thought was the story of the Bell Witch was an entirely different story with the same set of words. And that was Who Put Bella in the Witch Elm. That's the story I kept thinking it was. It was not this story, which I'd actually never heard of. So, when I started to do my research for this story, I was very confused. And then I did a little rearranging of the words and was like, wait a minute. So, I'm going to tell you guys the story of the Bell Witch right now, but then I'm also going to tell you guys the story of Who Put Bella in the Witch Elm, because I know that story and was totally prepared to share that story, but I had to learn about this one because this is a story that was asked of me in the first place. So we're gonna get into it, but before I get into it, I just want to say thank you guys for all your support and all of your cries for Storycraft to continue. I am definitely exploring that as a possible option. I will say I am running off of requests right now, so if you have requests and things that you would like to hear, Storycraft is not just limited to fairy tales and folklore. It's also open to mythology, scary stories, paranormal stories, history, things, all sorts of things. Anything you can tell a story about, I do in this section. So if there's something you've been dying to learn about or want to hear retold in my way, leave it in the comments below, because that is 100% the surefire way to guarantee that I will continue to do this, because as long as I have obligations, I will continue to do this segment. So yeah, let's get into it. We want to talk about the Bell Witch, so we're jumping right in. This story starts out in 1804 with a man named John Bell and his wife Lucy. At the time, they have 6 children. They will go on to have more. But right now, they have 6 children. And they're currently on a farm in North Carolina. But they're like, this sucks. So they leave their farm. They do the whole, like, Oregon Trail thing. But not to Oregon. They go, actually, to Robertson County, Tennessee. And they post up right next to the Red River, which is currently modern-day Adams, Tennessee. There is no Red River, Tennessee anymore. But they're in Robertson County, and there's only a couple people out there. There's not that many people right now. So they're literally, among the first settlers of Robertson County. And because they're so close to the Red River, a lot of people pass through their property, their little tract of land that they've claimed for themselves, and they end up becoming sort of like a not like a center, but like a hub for people, because lots of people have to go to the river to get water, do laundry, they have picnics out there, all that stuff. So they're always passing by the property and meeting the Bells and their family and all that all the time. And it turns out that John Bell is actually really gregarious and generous. He's not funny, though. That was something I noticed in the in my research, where people were like, he was a really cool guy, but he didn't make jokes. And I'm like, how are you friends with this guy who didn't make jokes? But I don't understand. I thrive off of my own humor, so that's just me. But apparently he was a super cool guy, super down to earth. The family was really chill. Everybody liked them. So they would often stop by at their house. And John was, really, type A, so he not only moved his whole family out here, got established, he cut the trees down on their property, as many as he needed, built their house, built a 2-story house, and started, building their farms and getting really well established and, really well set up immediately. He did not hesitate to get them, built up in their new home. And once he got himself and his family squared away, he started to develop the town, because he was like, oh, we need to help all these other neighbors build their homes and their properties, and we need to set up shop, and we need to have these buildings. So he was always building this town. So he was not just settling Robertson County. He was I'm gonna build Robertson County up from the bottom. And he did this very quickly. It's with the help of other people, of course. He didn't do it all by himself. He had older children who helped him, and the other townspeople, of course, pitched in. But he was the driving force behind how quickly this area got built up. And during this time, over the course of several years, they were very happy, and they got really well settled. They had 3 more children while they were living in Robertson County, and their older children would help them with the farm and around the town, like I said, helping to build up the settlement, and eventually they would go on to get married and have their own children. So the Bell family got a lot larger and a lot more well established, for lack of better terms, in this area. And then by 1817, so 13 years after they've moved to Robertson County, John is just sort of walking his cornfields, checking out his farms, like making sure everything's cool. And while he's walking, he sees what he believes at first to be a giant dog. Like, and when I say giant dog, I don't just mean like a larger dog. I mean like, we're talking wolf sizes, like sort of approaching bear sizes, that kind of large dog. And he's looking at it, and it's sitting in the cornfield, like among the corn, and it's looking at him, and it's making like crazy eye contact, like in ways that dogs don't typically do. And while he's staring at it, he realizes it's not just a dog, it's a dog with a rabbit head. So now he's looking into rabbit eyes on a big dog body, but the body is weird. It's like extra lanky and looks like it has a couple extra joints to it. And he's just like, I've never seen anything like this before. He's terrified, and he's like, you know, an old-timey dude who hunts for his food and does all those things. So he's also carrying a gun. So what does he do? He does what any old-timey dude would do in this situation. He lifts his gun and he shoots at it. And then he runs over to where he sees the dog had been like sitting. And when he gets there, there's nothing there. There's not a paw print, there's not a footprint, there's not even like evidence that the dog was sitting in the grass. None of the grass is bent down, none of the corn stalks look like they've been like disturbed by anything. There's just nothing there. There's just, was a dog, then no dog. Creature, maybe skinwalker type thing. Of course, that's my own personal headcanon. But John, having seen all this and then experienced all this and been just wasted a shot, decides that it's not even worth bringing up. It's not even a big deal. He just saw a creature, shot at it, missed, and that was the end of the story. So he writes the whole experience off. And then he goes home. At a couple of days, weeks, questionable amount of time later, in the evening, the Bell family starts to hear these knocks on the walls of their house, like on the outside of the house. Something is knocking on the walls, on the doors, on the windows, and every time they got up out of bed to be like, let's go see what's going on, the knocking would stop. And then they'd be like, okay, maybe it's just the house settling, it's just the wood or whatever, like everybody go back to bed. So everybody would go back to bed, and then the knocking would start again, but this time on a different part of the house. So if it started on like the left side and they all got up to go check, it would stop, they'd go back to bed, and then it would start up on the right side of the house. So like on the complete opposite end of the house, the knocking would start again. And the knocks would start on all different sides of the house, but they would circle the house eventually. So John's like, okay, let's all go outside, check it out. So he gets the boys together, they go outside, they look, there's nothing there. There's no footprints, no person. They look underneath the house, you know, like they check the crawl spaces. They can't find any evidence that anybody was actually outside. Nothing is disturbed. And then they would go inside and it would start again. So John at this point is like, okay, don't tell anybody in the village because I think someone's pranking us. He's a very practical man who doesn't make jokes. So he's like, yeah, I think someone's pranking us. Don't go to the village and tell anybody, because if you tell them, they're going to know that we're on to them, and then, you know, they're going to change tactics and we're not going to be able to catch them. So the best course of action is to just keep quiet until we can catch the person who's doing this. But this goes on for weeks, like weeks and weeks and weeks, where they're being woken up every night by all this knocking and all this stuff, and they can never catch the person who they think is responsible, and they can't find any evidence that there's a person there. So, in May of 1818, which is a year after the dog incident, and months after the knocking begins, 4 of the Bell children are asleep in their beds. They're all in one room with a double bunk bed situation happening, and they're woken up by the sound of what sounds like rats gnawing at wood, specifically the wood of their bed frames. Like, it's so loud that it wakes them up from sleep. And when they put their feet on the ground, like they get up to go check, so they put their feet down, the gnawing stops. And then they're looking around and they're like, I can't see anything, nothing's been gnawed, the wood on the bed looks fine, we don't see any evidence of rats or anybody chewing. So they're like, all right, so they get back in bed. And as soon as they close their eyes, it starts up again. And like rinse, wash, repeat, this cycle continues to repeat itself. And it goes on for days. 3 days specifically, and the boys could barely sleep. Like, they could barely, like, handle it. They kept just being woken up by the sound, and it would get louder. So, it would start out softly until they woke up. They would hear it. They'd try to look. Nothing would be there. They go back to bed, and then the next time it came, it would be even louder than it was before. So this goes on 3 days, right? And on the third night, instead of the gnawing, chewing sound that they were hearing through the wood, they start hearing this, like, choking sound, like somebody's being strangled beneath their beds. Like, and there's, like, a gulping, gasping noise, like someone is just, like, struggling for air. And the same thing would happen. They would get up, and it would stop. But eventually, like, the boys are like, we can't handle this. So they wake up the family. Like, they wake up everybody in the house, and they start telling them all about what's happening, what's been happening for the last couple of days. Because, you know, it's in addition to the knocking. So there's knocking, rats chewing, and now somebody is being strangled underneath their beds. So they go and they tell the family, and the family searches the entire house, and they can't find a single trace of anything. And so John finally is like, all right, this tactic that we have of not telling anybody, not working. So they decide to go confide in their neighbor, and they're like, hey, this is what's happening to us. I know it sounds crazy, but, like, it's been going on for months now. We can barely get any rest. Everybody's so stressed out and tired. Like, do you have any advice? And so the neighbor's like, okay, I'm going to come over and stay the night, and I'll experience this for myself. And then, you know, like, I'll be there for support, and I'll help you guys get to the bottom of it. Because remember, they're very well liked. The Bell family is very well liked. So, of course, their neighbor's like, yeah, I'm going to totally come help you find out who's haunting you or what the heck's going on. Like, I'm down for it. But the neighbor comes over, and he experiences all of the phenomenon. The knocking, the gnawing, the gasping, and he absolutely bails the fuck out. Which, like, W for the neighbor, because he's surviving the horror movie, right? Like, he's like, I'm out. I can't do it. He does not make it the entire night. But, of course, now that this has happened, now that they have burst the little bubble of secrecy, the whole town knows, because that's how things work in small towns, right? So the whole town finds out, and then other townspeople start offering, like, their services. So they're like, I'll also stay the night and help you guys, like, figure out what's going on. So they do. People start coming over and staying the night, and then they're thinking, like, if I stay the night, if I come over, then all the stuff will stop, because the thing that's haunting you will be too scared once I'm there, because that's, you know, the hubris of man, right? But they're also trying to offer some security and support, and also want to witness the phenomenon that's happening, so that they, you know, they can, like, verify and validate all of these claims. And this goes on for weeks. So people are going over, they're staying the night, and they're experiencing the same things, and they're also looking around trying to find any evidence of who it could possibly be, and they can't find anything. And it gets to the point where people start coming up with their own theories, which, of course, like, naturally, as you would do, you would start, like, coming up with some headcanons and some theories for the situation. And they start thinking that maybe it's the youngest child trying to get some attention, so she's doing all these shenanigans. So the solution is that they decided to have people come over and stay the night, but then watch all of the family members, like, on their own, to see if any of the family members were responsible, which is so creepy. I can't even imagine someone being like, hey, I know you're being haunted, but I'm going to spend the night and watch you sleep to see if you're the one doing the haunting. Weird. But it is a way to verify and prove that none of the family members are responsible. So they do that, and none of the family members are responsible. Everybody is exactly where they're supposed to be when all this creepy stuff starts happening. So they're like, okay, so it's none of the family members. All of the family members have been ruled out. So then they're like, okay, so maybe someone hates this family and they've targeted them, and they're just terrorizing them. But still, they can't find any evidence of anybody being on the property to do this terrorizing in the first place. And with all the people who are invested in this now, they absolutely would have caught somebody sneaking around the property by this point, and they haven't. So then they're like, okay, someone learned how to be a ventriloquist. They learned ventriloquism, so they could throw their voice and do all these sounds, but, like, they can't figure out who, because they don't know who. There's no evidence of anybody else, right? So it's just a very frustrating thing. And people would come over and they would help them, like, search their house, and they'd, you know, be searching, like, in floorboards and closets and crawl spaces and all the places that somebody could possibly hide. The people were coming over and not, like, tearing up their house, but essentially tearing up their house to see if they could find, like, where this culprit was hiding to do these things, but they just could not come up with any results. They could not find anything. And the noises kept happening. Like, it never stopped. This whole time, it never stops. And while this is going on, John Bell starts to go through some changes. So he goes from being, like, the friendly, generous guy to being really withdrawn, really quiet. He starts talking less and less. And when he is in conversation, people notice that he starts getting, like, a facial tic. Like, his eyes start twitching, which is normal. It's a side effect of, like, stress, right? Like, so you would be like, okay. But then it gets worse, because then he starts losing focus. And then he would stop mid-sentence and stare off into, like, the middle distance, and his jaw would start twitching now. Not just his eyes, but his jaw would start twitching so violently that people were like, oh my god, John, like, are you okay? And once he snapped back to it, he would just walk away without a word and go sit in his room and stare at the walls for hours. So, like, something is going on with John. So at this point, the town starts to, like, come up with more rumors, right? Now they're not trying to come up with helpful, like, theories. Now they're just throwing anything at the wall to see if it sticks. And the thing that they throw at the wall this time is that it's Kate Batts, who happens to be one of the neighbors of the Bells, and they think that she's responsible for the farm, all the hauntings at the farm. And here's the thing, a little backstory on Kate Batts, you guys, okay? So Kate Batts is married to a man. I don't really care about him. He ends up being disabled. I forgot his name. That's what happened. Sorry. But he ends up getting disabled in a farm accident. And because he's disabled, he can't work. And we're talking about the 1800s. So he has to work to provide for his family and their 3 children. And he can't. So Kate is left with the responsibility of not only taking care of their 3 children and their household, but becoming the head of the household. And as such, she sort of finds herself in a position of being deemed a very unpleasant woman to be around, because she is loud, she is outspoken, she is brash, and she's very demanding. And a couple of things happen over the course of a couple of years between the Batts and the Bells that sort of breed this bad blood between them. So first up, it's important to note that John Bell, being the industrious man that he was, bought up a lot of land in the Robertson County area. This is how he became so successful and so wealthy, was by buying up a bunch of land, establishing farms, and stuff like that, which allowed him to be more generous. But because Kate Batts' husband couldn't work, they had to sell pieces of their land for income, and her husband was the one sort of handling the deals, and he wouldn't tell Kate that this is what he was doing. So eventually Kate finds out that her husband has been selling chunks and parcels of their land to the Bell family, and when she hears how much money he's gotten in exchange for it, Kate becomes very upset and very vocal around the town about it, because she feels like John Bell basically underpaid for their land and offered her husband a shitty deal, knowing full well that they needed the money and were desperate for it. So he got the money, like, he got the land at, like, a really stupid low price because they were so desperate for money, and took advantage of their situation, basically. This quote-unquote really generous guy took advantage of them for capitalism, which, like, I'm not surprised. But this is what she's saying. So she's telling people about this, and there's another situation here with a slave, and I don't really know how much validity there is to this, but this was slavery time. So, like, here's the thing. The Batts had some slaves on their property, and they sold one of their slaves to John Bell, who happened to be a very young girl, and John Bell paid for the slave, but was like, oh, she's too young to take away from her mother right now, so I'm going to come back when she's older and pick her up when she's, like, ready to be a slave? Question marks. And that was okay. So she stayed with the Batts family until she got older, and then John Bell came to pick her up. But now she was older and stronger and more fit to work. So Mr. Batts was like, you owe me more money for this stronger, healthier, better version of the slave that I originally sold you. And John Bell was like, no, I paid for her already. You can't just up the price now that she's older and worth more to you suddenly. So I'm not paying more. And he took the slave back to his farm, and, like, that also put a very sour taste in Kate Batts' mouth. Not the slavery, just not making as much money as she wanted to off the sale of a young girl. I don't know. I only found one account that stated this happened, so I don't know how much, like, validity there is here. People don't bring it up very often, probably because slavery makes people uncomfortable, but here we are. So all of these things led to Kate Batts going around town and telling everyone how cheap of a man John Bell was and how, like, shitty he was to her husband and took advantage of their family. So it started to sort of turn some people's opinions on the Bell family, specifically John Bell. But he was just still so generous with his money and helpful to his neighbors that they were like, he's not really that bad of a guy. But Kate had the unfortunate disposition of being considered to be very unpleasant, outspoken, and she had this weird habit of using very large words in sentences that she would use incorrectly. So if you had a conversation with her, it was sort of a weird roller coaster ride to be on, because she would be throwing out these really big words like she was really super, super intelligent, but she'd be using them wrong. So you'd be like, I don't understand. I don't know what you're meaning. So people would get a little bit frustrated talking to her. And it's sort of strange. It's sort of a little bit juxtaposed because people generally regarded her to be very, very, like, intelligent. And also very good with finances when she was given the control of it. Like, when her husband got out of the way, she was able to sort of manage their finances very well. And all of these things added up to people being like, well, obviously she's a witch. Because, like, how can she not be a witch in this scenario? She's outspoken, strong-minded, kind of smart, and she hates the one guy that we all like. So, therefore, ergo, she's a witch. So they start calling her a witch, not to her face, of course, but they start telling everybody that the haunting at the Bell House is the product of the Kate Batts witch, and eventually they shorten it down to Kate. Now, some people state that one of the neighbors came over, and while all the spiritual phenomena was happening, they asked the spirit, "What's your name?" And it says Kate. That's hearsay. We don't really know if that's what happened. Just, something somebody tossed out there to support this story about Kate Batts being a witch. And of course, eventually, because it's a small town, this rumor gets back to Kate Batts, and understandably, she is super offended that everyone thinks that she's responsible for the haunting and that she's a witch. So she goes up and down the town, basically, and tells everyone that she is not the witch responsible for what's happening at the Bell Farm, and that she hates John, with all of her might. She hates this man and hopes that he suffers, but she is not a witch, and she is not cursing the family, and she's not responsible for what's happening to the family. So, she doesn't do a great job of advocating for herself here, but she's 100% certain that she is not the one doing it to them. And this is basically the state of things for 3 years. 3 years, until 1820, the Bells just sort of got used to being haunted all the time. And, everyone just sort of goes on with their lives. They're like, yeah, this is still happening, but, we can't stop living because our house is haunted. Except that John continues to deteriorate, and his, vacant spells and his dazes, they get even worse as time goes on, and he eventually confides to his wife that he thinks someone is torturing him to death. And, people are getting really concerned for his mental health and his state, because it's just he's declining rapidly as the time goes on. So one day, Esther Bell, his daughter, she goes to get eggs from the little chicken coop, and so she's walking down the road. It's a little bit of a distance from her, and she hears this gravel crunching behind her, and when she turns around, she sees a woman all dressed in black, her back to her, walking towards the house that Esther just left. And like I said, they're all posted up next to Red River. People come and go by their house all the time. They're a center, they're a cultural hub for everybody to come by and visit, and, people come around all the time. So she's used to people just walking up to her house all the time. So she doesn't think anything of it. She just continues on. She goes to get the eggs from the chicken coop, and when she comes back out, the woman is still on the road. She should have made it up to the house by now, but she isn't. She's still walking very slowly down the road. And so Esther's like, okay. And again, this is a woman all dressed in black, walking very slowly down the road with her head down. And Esther's walking closer to her. And as she's getting closer, she's like, maybe I recognize her. Maybe she's that lady from the village. I can't place her name or face because I can't see it, but I think I know who that is. So she starts calling out to her, and she's like, hello, hello. And the woman doesn't respond. And she doesn't even react to Esther calling out to her. And as Esther gets closer, she's calling again because she's like, oh, maybe she can't hear me. And the woman just continues to slowly walk to the house, but still like keeping a pace with Esther, so that Esther is, even though she's getting closer, she can't quite close the gap between them. So it gets to the point where Esther's about 15 feet away, and she's like, hello, hello, my gosh. And at this point, the woman, without turning around, takes the bonnet off of her head, throws it onto the ground, and then throws her hair forward, and it's long, and it's black, and it's matted. And she begins to run her fingers through her hair, kind of like, you know, like you're combing your fingers through your hair, except that she has these huge mats in her hair. And as Esther gets closer to her, she's like, oh my god, like, what the heck is happening? And the closer Esther gets, the faster and faster this woman starts to go through her hair. And because it's so matted, she's not combing through her hair, you guys. She is ripping chunks of her hair out, and Esther can hear it being ripped from her scalp. And this terrifies Esther. Like, finally, girl is terrified. So Esther runs around the woman and goes up to the house, and she starts calling out for her older sister who's inside the house. So her older sister comes downstairs, and together they stand at the window. The woman is now in front of the door, like directly in front of the window that they are both looking out of, and she is just like running her fingers through her hair so quickly that it's like a blur of motion, and chunks of her hair is just falling out and falling out. And then eventually the woman sort of looks up through this like sheet of hair, whatever's left on her head, and she makes eye contact with Esther. And when she makes eye contact with Esther, she freezes in place. And it's so unnerving, and she's locked in this, like, freeze for so long until Esther blinks. When she blinks, the woman is all of a sudden turned and starts to walk around the house, like, going towards the left. So when they see this, both sisters like panic, and they run to the next window to see where this woman is going. And the woman continues to walk around the house. So they continue to follow her from window to window until they get to the point where the woman is now like faced with a fence that covers up the side property. But when she gets to this window and this fence, she's now being followed by 3 small children. Nobody knows where the children came from. They just appeared from between one window to the next window. Now she's being followed by 3 small children. She climbs over this fence. The 3 children climb over with her. And then they walk towards some trees that are on the property, and each of them climbs up into their own individual tree. And when they get there, they turn all the way around. So now all 4 of them are facing the 2 sisters who are watching them still from a window, and they start rocking their bodies back and forth in the tree so hard that the trees now are like violently swaying back and forth, like they might break at any minute. This is how hard they are rocking around in these trees. And so at this moment, Esther's sister, her husband comes in through the front door. So they're screaming at him. They're like, come see this. You have to come see this at once. So when he goes over there, he's like, oh, those trees are moving really crazy. And the sisters realize that he can't see the people, like the woman and the 3 children in the trees. He can only see the trees moving. So they start describing it to him, but they're getting more and more frantic as time is going on. So they're basically just screaming at him that there is a woman and children making those trees move, and he's just like, the trees are moving so crazy. So eventually he's like, okay, let's just go check it out, because I don't see this woman and these children. So when they go around to go out the door to go onto this side property so that they can see these trees up close, all of them are gone. The woman, the children, everybody gone. And when they walk up to the trees are no longer moving. There's not even like evidence of like any breakage or any twigs have fallen to the ground or leaves or anything like that. There's no footprints. Again, there is no evidence that any of this actually happened. It's all gone when they get out there. So about a month later, John and his oldest son, who still lives with them, are walking the property, doing the rounds as per usual, and it gets to a point where John just stops. He freezes up. He starts grabbing at his face, and like he looks like he's in agony, and his son's like, oh my god, Dad, like what's wrong? And then he starts to contort and bend over backwards, his whole body like going into a perfect arch as it comes down to the ground, and he starts to writhe, and his limbs start to pop and do all sorts of crazy things. And when his son reaches down to grab him, as soon as he touches John, there's this huge, like, hideous shriek that just sort of emerges from all around, everywhere, all at once. And once the screaming stops, John's body collapses, and he sort of folds back up into himself, regaining control of his body, and he begins to sob, just starts sobbing uncontrollably, and he tells his son that he doesn't have long left to live. And a couple of weeks after that, on December 19th of 1820, everyone goes down to breakfast, but they notice that John doesn't come down. So when they go upstairs to go check on him, he's still breathing, but his eyes are closed. But he's completely unresponsive. So they try to wake him, it doesn't work. So then his son goes downstairs to get some of the medicine from the medicine cabinet to see what they can do to sort of revive him. All of the medicines are gone. Everything is gone except for one vial of like brown grayish liquid that nobody has ever seen before. Nobody can identify. And so they call for the doctor because they're like, we don't have any medicine, get the doctor right now. So the doctor comes immediately, no hesitation, because again, the Bells are really well established, they're really well off, so of course the doctor's going to show up as quick as possible for them. And when he shows up, he has no idea what's going on with John, so he's like, yeah, I don't know how to fix this. But he tells them to take the vial of mysterious substance they found in their medicine cabinet and test it on a farm animal and see what happens. So without giving you guys all the graphic details, because it was very upsetting, they do, and the animal dies immediately. So somebody stuck poison in their medicine cabinet and took all of their medicines, and everyone in the family alleges, like, they didn't do it. We would never do that. We don't even know what this bottle is. So everyone's like, okay, we believe you. Like, we honestly know that crazy shit's happening at your house. So, like, nobody questions that the family put poison in the cabinet. Like, they're like, no, you guys definitely didn't do it. But the doctor's like, I don't know. Just keep him comfortable. Maybe he'll come back and we'll see what happens. Turns out that on the next day, John Bell passes away. He never woke up again. And as soon as he dies, the hauntings stop. Like, immediately stop. Once he's gone, no more hauntings, no more sounds, no more scratching, no more gulping, no more crazy ladies scratching out their hair. All of it stops. A couple of the townspeople allege that they can still see, like, floating lights on the property, and occasionally will hear, like, a strange singing going on, but, like, there's really nothing else happening. The Bell family is fine. Everybody's moving on. And that's the end of the Bell Witch hauntings. Like, that's the end. The property ends up getting torn down, I think, like, later in the 1800s, 1840, 1850. So the house doesn't actually exist anymore. But on the property that's still there, there is a cave that they're all now calling the Bell Witch Cave that people are asserting is the actual center point of the hauntings and was the cause of the hauntings. There's a lot of rumors that there was like a demon in the cave or a spirit or a witch living in the cave that was haunting the family and personally haunting John. John was apparently the target. So people believe that's the source of the hauntings. People still believe that Kate Batts was behind it. But nobody really knows. And because it stopped happening, that's the end of it. So that's the end of the Bell Witch hauntings. There's a couple of, like, extra little side stories I didn't include because they didn't really add a lot to it. There's a sighting of a girl in a green dress hanging from the trees by, like, her arms, like she's swinging from a tree branch that one of the daughters would see occasionally. And that's, like, essentially all of it. I think this is a very interesting story because John Bell goes on record as having died of supernatural causes, and he is the first person in America to have that listed on his death certificate, which is pretty badass, but also very interesting that they decided to go with that and nothing else. But also, the fact that it's called the Bell Witch haunting is crazy to me because there's very little evidence of witchcraft and lots of evidence of just, like, ghostly, spiritual, demon-y shit. But I feels very targeted towards Kate Batts. Like, they really wanted to pin this on her. But the thing with the Bell Witch haunting and why, like, a lot of this is hearsay is that none of this stuff got written down at the time that it was happening. Nobody documented this stuff. This is all from reports and, like, stories that were passed down to one of the Bell children's husbands. So one of the Bell daughters eventually gets married, and then her husband writes the story and sort of perpetuates this story to the way where, like, at the time when it came out, it was very sensationalized. People were like, whoa, this is so spooky. But people were like, he's a really smart guy. He could very well be behind how this story went from being, like, a little tiny, like, spooky story that you tell your kids at night to this huge legend of this area that's, like, sort of stood the test of time. But because the story came out way after all of the events that occurred, it came out after John died, a lot of it becomes sort of allegedlys and hearsays and stuff like that because nobody wrote anything down when it was happening. And so we only have this one guy's account to go off of and whatever he says that he collected as, like, evidence. And then just a little bit here and there that people were able to find, like, documented. But there's not a lot of, like, hard evidence. And by hard evidence, I mean stuff that actually got written down at the time stuff was happening to sort of verify everything. Of course, they didn't have, like, a bunch of paranormal researchers capturing, like, audio impressions of the situation or anything like that. So we don't have harder evidence, of course, naturally, given the time frame. But it's still a really interesting story, and it is like one of those early American hauntings that sort of become a legend. You can still go and like visit the town of Adams. They have like a little Bell Witch museum type situation that you can check out, which is actually really cool. I would love to see it. I have so many like thoughts and theories about what this could possibly be. A lot of things are really interesting to me because there's a lot that's like tied into actual witchy folklore, because witches were thought to believe, words are really hard, were believed to have been able to take off their skins at night and transform into either a black cat or a rabbit. So it's very interesting to me that the creature that like John saw and shot at was a rabbit-headed dog that was like shaped weird and kind of funky, because it sort of ties into that like bit of folklore a little bit, and sort of does lend a little credence to it being a witch that's responsible. Maybe a witch who took it really personally, that John shot at her and was like, it's on, like Donkey Kong. And maybe she did live in that cave, and maybe that's what happened, and that was like the whole situation. I don't know, but it is very interesting, and I was really excited to share this story, especially because it was one I hadn't heard. I thought it was totally something different. Like I said, I will do the other story next week for you guys, because that's the story I know. But when I got this request on Patreon, I was so excited to do it, and then I was like, wait a minute, I've never heard of this. Hold on, let me do this again. And when I did the research, I was like, oh, this is like snaps. This is great. I love this. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this story, and I hope that you will leave some requests for some more stories like this. I would definitely love to share these things. I love learning stuff. So if you have like a ghost story or something that you know about that maybe I've never heard of, put that in the comments. I would love to look it up and learn about it and share it with you guys. But that's going to be it for me for today, guys. If you made it to the end of the video, I appreciate your faces, and I will catch you guys all in the next one. Until then, guys, happy crafting. Bye!